Welcome back to Relax RV. Hi, my name is Paul. I'm doing a podcast on stress while RVing. And I know none of you have ever experienced anything stressful while RVing. Well, perhaps a little bit. Now, stress means different things to different people, and what stresses one person out may just make another person laugh. And for that, I'm jealous. So let's talk about stress and RVing. Welcome back, everybody. Paul Sebastian, registered nurse, stress management consultant, RVer, podcaster. So this is season 2. Episode 68. It's being recorded and hopefully uploaded, released on September 23rd, 2021. New England 2.0. Last week was 1.0, or 2 weeks ago. Anyway, hope you're all well. So I was looking at my stats on this episode, on this podcast, and I've had over 7,000 downloads. That's pretty awesome. I have a magnet on my car, on the Jeep that we tow, and I pass out cards periodically. And that's really all the advertising I do other than social media. And none of that is paid. It's all just word of mouth. So please spread the word. So we last left you. We just left Mount Washington in New Hampshire. We drove 2.5 miles to Newport Center, Vermont, which we came to find out it's in the Northeast Kingdom. Yep. Never heard of it before, and it seems like the only people that have ever heard of the Northeast Kingdom are people in the Northeast Kingdom, and really just about every part of Vermont, or at least the people we talk to. Outside of Vermont, we've talked to a few people, and nobody has said, "Oh yeah, I know about that." So apparently, years and years ago, there was a governor who was doing some sort of promoting, and he said that the northeast part of Vermont is more like a kingdom than a state, and it stuck. So this area of Vermont, neither of us have ever been to. It's way up by the Canadian border. It's peaceful, quiet, more of the quintessential Vermont that I've heard of as compared to some of the bigger, more popular tourist locations for skiing throughout Vermont. We talked to a bunch of locals up there, and they asked if we liked the Northeast Kingdom, and we absolutely did. And they said, "Good, don't tell anybody about it. We wanted to stay quiet. So, don't tell anyone." Alright. So we were staying at a Boondockers Welcome location for 4 nights. And we had a really nice host, Mr. and Mrs., and there was another couple parked there who were full-timing in a Class B at this location. So the first night, our host built a campfire, and we sat around and got to know each other a little bit better. It was really nice. we had very little signal up here. So we found all through Vermont the signal was sketchy. And the Northeast Kingdom, it was really sketchy or non-existent, even in big towns. We were kind of surprised. So it took an extra day to get the last episode uploaded and all that. So I do apologize. The next day, we went to a town called Derbyline, Vermont. This is up on the Canadian border. I had heard about this town a while ago. We put it on our Google Maps as a starred place that we want to see. Again, I have a YouTube video on how we plan our trips. So if you're interested, check it out. And it's Relax RV Podcast over on YouTube. So this town, Derbytown, what an interesting place. There's a yellow ribbon crossing over one of the streets at the border between Canada and the U.S. And kind of like a police tape at a crime scene. Apparently it wasn't always there. Well, obviously it wasn't always there. But apparently it's pretty new with COVID. And they really started cracking down on people coming and going across the country border. And I guess too after 9/11. There was a border patrol guy sitting in his car and just watching and protecting. And he was a good 150 yards away from the ribbon and around the corner, so he couldn't see that area. There's a library in the town and an opera house attached to the library. So if that isn't odd enough, we walked in the front door of the library, and about 10 feet in, there's a piece of tape on the floor. Cross over the tape and you are in Canada. So we could get into Canada without a passport. However, there's no back door to the library. So you go in the U.S. and the only way out is the front door back into the U.S. Very, very interesting. So we were talking to a volunteer that was there and to the librarian assistant. We had a really wonderful, lengthy conversation about the borderline, etc. The name of the library is the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, and I have a link to them on Google Maps in the show notes. So they were telling us that they knew a couple, or one of them knew a couple that were married, and he was in the U.S., I think on vacation, and then they shut down the border for COVID, and he couldn't go back. So she was in Canada, he was in New York, or in Vermont rather, in the U.S., and they would meet at this town line and have conversations and catch up and all of that. And they did this for quite a long period of time. Very, very strange. So we were taking pictures, and there's a link to our pictures on Instagram. So one of the pictures we have surprised faces on, and they were posed looks. However, we came to find out when we took that, we were actually in Canada, looking back at the U.S., and we had crossed the border illegally, and we were subject to a hefty fine. It's something like $8,000 or something like that. So, again, don't tell anybody we did this. We stepped over the line by about a foot or two. The only time that I had ever been to a border, the Canadian border, I'd been on a highway. And you go through with a car, and I'm sure you've all experienced that or not. So, this was not like that. Very interesting. So apparently there's a lake near there, and half of it's in Canada. And they do a cruise ship that, it's a small little boat. But they do a cruise tour where you can go over to Canada and have lunch and come back, or you could drive into Canada for lunch. We didn't choose to do either one of those. We did bring our passports with us in case we wanted to. We were fully vaccinated by the point we got there. However, you needed a negative COVID test, and it had to be a certain type of COVID test, and it had to be within 48 hours, and it was like way too much work. And I'm a stress management consultant, and that was stressing me out, so we didn't do it. So apparently, with that boat, if you have your own private boat, you have to submit a float plan, and your boat has to be inspected before leaving the dock. There's also a bike trail that starts in the U.S. and continues up into Canada, and you need a passport and everything else I just mentioned. There's also a snowmobile trail that does the same thing. So apparently they're really cracking down on leisurely strolls across the Canadian border. So there you go. We're hoping that perhaps this coming winter we'll have our snowmobile. And Vermont has a huge snowmobile trail system called VAST, V-A-S-T. And we're kind of hoping that we can get into Canada at that time on a snowmobile. It'd be really cool to do. But we just found out that there's a lot of parts that are on back order when they're building skidoos. And they're not sure if we're going to have our snowmobile completely assembled by the end of the year. Very, very interesting. So we left there. We wanted to be a little bit more active. So we went up to Avril Mountain. It's Avril. It's about a mile to the top. And apparently Vermont doesn't really believe in switchbacks. So it was straight up a 600-foot elevation gain. But the view up top was definitely worth it. We met a woman at the top. She shared a glass of wine with us. We had a really nice conversation about RVing, and it sounded like we whetted our appetite for wanderlust. So, hi Terry, if you're listening. She suggested to us hiking up Brousseau Mountain, Broussseau. So after we left Avril, we drove over, which is like a mile away, and we